Welcome to episode 95 of the 3M Fear podcast. Bob had always dreamt about living in a big, beautiful house. He believed that a house could show success and provide a good life for his family. When the Cranmers arrived, they were excited to explore the house. As Bob and Lisa walked through the house with the realtor, their younger son, Bobby Jr., wandered off on his own. The rest of the family continued their tour, checking all the rooms, making sure that the house was in perfect condition. They went through the entire house and made their way down to the basement. After checking everything, when they came upstairs, they found Bobby Jr. crying and struggling to breathe. It seemed as if something had scared him. Since he was still young, Bob and Lisa assumed that he just got scared with something and that's why he was crying. Lisa, however, since the very first day felt uneasy. Something about the house made her uncomfortable. She didn't like the way it felt. She told Bob that this house gave her chills. But Bob was too focused. Remember, he always loved this house. In fact, Lisa would later go on to say that he was captivated by it, almost as if he was under a spell. He asked the realtor an unusual question. Is there anything wrong with the house? The realtor, understanding that Bob wanted to know why this house was at sale, told him that there was nothing wrong with the house. The realtor would also go on to say that a Catholic mass had been held several times in the living room. Now that was an odd thing to say because why would you tell a potential customer that a Catholic mass had been held several times in the house that they are about to buy? Now the most shocking part of all was that this did not affect Bob. He wanted that house. He was in love with that house. And he immediately signed the papers. Hello and welcome to the 3am Fear podcast. I'm Nikita Ferrao, mystery and thriller author. On this podcast, I talk about real crimes and real people. Due to the graphic nature of some of this content, listener discretion is advised. You can find the episode show notes on my website 3amfear.com. Let's get started. The Cranmer family's journey began with Bob, a former army officer, and his wife Lisa. They got married in 1980 and started their family. After leaving the military in 1986, Bob got a job offer at AT&T, and the family decided to move to New Jersey. But they always wanted to return to Pennsylvania, a place where they had grown up. In 1987, just after building a new house, Bob received a job transfer opportunity. The family decided that this was the best time to move back and begin searching for a house in Brentwood, Pennsylvania. Bob and Lisa were blessed with 4 children: 4-year-old Jessica, 3-year-old Bobby, 2-year-old David, and 2-month-old Charles. Let me tell you a little history about the house that they bought. The house at 3406 Brownsville Road was built in 1909 to 10 and had 3 previous owners. That is before the Cranmers moved in. In December of 1988, Bob and Lisa Cranmer bought the house upon being transferred to Pittsburgh by his employer. Bob would go on to say that that house was his dream house and it mysteriously went up for sale the very same week that they began looking for a house to buy. As a young child, he would often stand and look at the house, hoping that someday he could have a house like that. Never in his wildest dreams did he think that he would live in that exact same house with his family. The 3-story house was built in the craftsman style and would later be designed as a historical landmark by the Pittsburgh History and Landmarks. Bob had always dreamt about living in a big, beautiful house. He believed that a house could show success and provide a good life for his family. When the Cranmers arrived, they were excited to explore the house. As Bob and Lisa walked through the house with the realtor, their younger son, Bobby Jr., wandered off on his own. The rest of the family continued their tour, checking all the rooms, making sure that the house was in perfect condition. They went through the entire house and made their way down to the basement. After checking everything, when they came upstairs, they found Bobby Jr. crying and struggling to breathe. It seemed as if something had scared him. Since he was still young, Bob and Lisa assumed that he just got scared with something and that's why he was crying. Lisa, however, since the very first day felt uneasy. Something about the house made her uncomfortable. She didn't like the way it felt. She told Bob that this house gave her chills. But Bob was too focused. Remember, he always loved this house. In fact, Lisa would later go on to say that he was captivated by it, almost as if he was under a spell. He asked the realtor an unusual question. Is there anything wrong with the house? The realtor, understanding that Bob wanted to know why this house was at sale, told him that there was nothing wrong with the house. The realtor would also go on to say that a Catholic mass had been held several times in the living room. Now that was an odd thing to say, because why would you tell a potential customer that a Catholic mass had been held several times in the house that they are about to buy? Now the most shocking part of all was that this did not affect Bob. He wanted that house. He was in love with that house. And he immediately signed the papers. As time went on, Bob and Lisa would find several things about the house, including the fact that the current owners were desperate to sell. In fact, they were so desperate to sell that they sold the house to him at a very low price. This was unusual, but once again, Bob was excited about the house, so he didn't care. It was 1988, and winter had set in. It was a cold December day, but the Cranmer family felt warm inside as they celebrated the purchase of their new house. It was not just any house, it was a historical landmark. Soon, the Cranmers packed up their lives in New Jersey and prepared to move into their new home on Brownsville Road. Bob and Lisa, along with their 4 children, were excited to start this new chapter of their life. But what they didn't know was that this dream house had a dark secret. At first, everything seemed normal for the family. Their home was quiet and peaceful, just like any other house. But that peace would not last long. The following spring, Bob would find a small metal box buried in the front yard, and in that box were Catholic religious items. When he called the previous owner to tell them what he had found, the owner just said, "The house is fine," but put the box back where he found it. Soon after moving in, the family started noticing things. Doors would open by themselves. Objects would even start to move or go missing without any explanation. And then, even stranger things began to happen. The taps would turn on by themselves and there would be running water even though no one was in the room. One of the creepiest thing was that when the family would leave the house for the evening, they would make sure that all the lights were turned off. But when they returned, every single light in the house would be turned on. Even after checking all the doors and windows, they made sure that no one had broken into the house. But even then, the lights would always turn on by themselves. And it wasn't just the lights in the main room also. Every single light in the house, including the basement, would be turned on. At first, Bob and Lisa were puzzled. They weren't scared, just surprised. They thought maybe they had a ghost in their house, and they took that as a joke. Maybe there was a friendly ghost who was roaming around, and so they didn't think much about it. But they were wrong. The family settled into their normal routine. Instead of getting scared and running away, they decided that they would make this their life. Now, after the initial phase of all these small things happening, it got worse. The family began hearing loud banging noises through the house. These sounds not just came during the night, but also the day. No matter where they were, what they were doing, suddenly these mysterious noises would echo through the home, making them feel uneasy. At first, they tried to ignore it. They thought it was an old house and maybe that's why it's happening. But then they realized it wasn't a coincidence. It happened every time that they were doing something. The Cranmer family had always experienced strange things in the house. They would hear noises at night, footsteps, and even though no one was there, they would check the house, double check the house, but no one was there. And over time, they got used to it and made it as a part of their life. To be honest, no one knows why the Cranmer family put up with all of this. But as years passed, Bob Cranmer built a successful career in politics. In the 1990s, he became a councilman and later the county commissioner. He gained respect and status in Western Pennsylvania, but while his professional life was thriving, his family life was falling apart. Bob and Lisa would fight all the time. There would be constant tension in the house, and this affected their entire family, including their children. Two of their children, along with Lisa, struggled with serious mental health issues and even needed to be hospitalized. And in the middle of all this chaos, Bob sometimes wondered if the strange presence in the house was affecting his family. But every time he had this thought, he just tried to push it away. He was not ready to get rid of the house. And then one night, in 2003, something terrifying happened. Bob's oldest son, Bob Jr., suddenly attacked him in his sleep. The attack was so violent and unexpected, as if Bob Jr. had lost control of himself. At that time, Bob, Lisa, and their children, and Bob's elderly mother were all living in that house. Bob Jr. was quickly restrained and arrested after this attack. The very next morning, Bob's elderly mother was found dead in her bed. She had passed away from natural causes. Fortunately for Bob Jr., the charges against him were dropped. But after this, there would be a series of tragic events, things that no one could explain, and there was nothing that Bob could do about it. Soon after Bob's mother died, it was as if something had unleashed itself in the house, and things just got worse. Initially, these strange occurrences were small and manageable. Things moving, taps turning on, knocking sounds that would be there, lights turning on and off. Those were all small things. Now, it was going to get worse. In 2004, despite everything that was happening in the house, Bob's oldest daughter Jessica made a surprising decision. Even after all her troubled childhood, everything that happened to her, the noises, the tap, everything, she decided that she would move back into the house with her family. She brought her husband Tom and their young son Colin with her. There was an apartment on the top floor of the house, and that became their new home. Little did they know that this return would only add to the mysteries and darkness surrounding the Cranmer house. Bob had always been a caring father, and when his daughter Jessica and her family needed a place to stay, he openly asked them to come and stay with him. He offered to let them live in the house so they can save some money and get things in order. With the rising cost of housing, he knew that how difficult it was for her to find another house, and so he let them live with him. What he didn't know then was that he was inviting his daughter and her family into their worst nightmare. As Jessica and her family moved their things into the house, Bob went about his usual routine. One day, after coming in from outside, he took off his coat and went to hang it on the large walk-in closet under the main staircase. When he opened the door, he noticed something odd. The pull chain from the light was wrapped tightly around the fixture. Bob had seen strange things before, so he didn't think much about it. He simply unwrapped the chain and moved on. Now, despite everything that was happening, we have to know that Bob was a very spiritual man. He was raised in Catholic faith and he held on to this faith. For the first time, he decided to do something about this strange activity in the house. On a small side table near the closet, he had a Bible and a rosary. Hoping that this could bring in some peace to the house, he took the rosary and tied it to the light chain in the closet. As he closed the door and walked away, he suddenly heard the clinking of beads. Scared, he turned back and opened the door, and to his shock, the rosary and the chain were once again wrapped tightly around the fixture. What seemed to be a simple coincidence now felt something scary. Bob, feeling this deep sense of unease, grabbed his Bible and stepped into the closet. He began to pray out loud, calling out to his faith for protection. And as he prayed, he felt an overwhelming weight pressing down on him, as if something invisible was pushing against his body. He also got this eerie sensation like someone was watching him. But when he turned, no one was there. Bob stayed in that closet for half an hour, praying with all his might. Finally, he finished and left, closing the door behind him. He thought that he had done his best and got rid of whatever was troubling his family. But unfortunately, he didn't. In the weeks that followed, Jessica and her family settled into their new home. They lived upstairs and were quite peaceful. But one night, Tom, Jessica's husband, went to check on his stepson, Colin. When he opened the door to the boys' room, he froze. Standing over Colin's bed was a woman. At first, he thought that it was Jessica. He even called out to her. But as soon as he did, the woman turned to him. She took several steps in his direction and suddenly vanished into thin air. That was not Jessica. Tom's heart pounded in his chest. Wasting no time, he rushed to Colin's bed, scooped him up, and carried him straight to Jessica's room. He needed to make sure that the boy was safe. Jessica was still trying to process everything that Tom was telling her. She told herself that maybe he imagined it, maybe it wasn't real. But deep down, everything that happened to her when she was a child, she knew that it wasn't. This house had something in it. Tom rushed down the stairs, his heart pounding, and went straight to talk to Bob. Bob was worried about his grandson, and he was not ready to take any chances. That night, he decided to stay in the boys' room. After climbing the stairs, he entered Colin's room and shut the door behind him. He turned on the lamp and sat in a chair nearby and began to pray. After an hour of reading scripture, Bob felt tired and he lay down on his grandson's bed to rest. He slowly drifted into sleep, but he was soon disturbed by loud bangs coming from inside the walls near his head. This sound startled him awake. He looked from left to right, trying to see where the sound was coming from, but he couldn't. And that's when he felt a sharp stinging pain on the side of his neck. Panicked, he jumped up and ran to the mirror. What he saw made his blood run cold. 3 long bloody scratch marks ran from his right ear down to his neck and onto his torso, as if something unseen had clawed him. Fear and confusion filled his mind. Unsure of how to explain all of this, he decided that he would not tell about this to anyone. He didn't want to worry his family. The next day, Bob Jr., the eldest son of the family, was in the living room studying for an upcoming exam. As he sat on the couch taking notes from his textbook, he suddenly felt a strange sensation, like someone was watching him, and this made him scared. And so he decided to get out for some fresh air. As he walked to the front door, he was only a few feet away when something flew past his head with a sharp sound and crashed into the wall beside him. Shocked, he looked down and saw a shattered CD on his feet. Someone had thrown the CD at him, but he was alone. Not knowing what else to do, Bobby Jr. quickly opened the front door and stepped outside, his heart racing. With all these strange events happening in the house, the Cranmer family had reached their limit. They were scared and desperate for help. They decided to contact a Catholic priest for guidance. They spoke to a man named Father Mike Sylvania. After telling the priest everything that had happened to them, he agreed to bless the house. Father Mike arrived at their home and began the blessing ritual. He moved from room to room, floor to floor, sprinkling holy water and saying prayers. He started on the main level and made his way to the basement, finally heading upstairs. But when he reached upstairs, he truly understood what the family was going through. As he climbed the creaking stairs, a heavy sense of unease settled over him. Every step that he took, he could feel it. Someone or something was watching him. There was no doubt in his mind that whatever had plagued this house was more than just a soul trying to trouble them. Whether it was a human spirit or something else, he could not find out. But one thing was sure: the family was in a grip of infestation. Someone had grabbed hold of this family and was not ready to let go. As he walked through the house, he completed his blessings, said his prayers under his breath, his voice steady, even as his pulse raced. When the ritual was finished, he turned to the family, offering words of encouragement, telling them that they have to stay strong. He left with a heavy heart because he knew that he could not help them. He did not know what was in that house, but he knew that he could not help them. Weeks passed and the life in the house continued, although everyone was afraid to move. One night, when the rest of the family was away, Jessica found herself alone upstairs. As she fell into this relaxing, beautiful dream, she was suddenly yanked from her dreams, her eyes snapping open. Panic filled through as she realized that her body could not move. It was as if her body was frozen in place. She could see everything, she could hear everything, but she could not move. A crushing weight pressed down to her chest. Someone or something was pressing against her chest so hard that she could not move her lips or breathe. And that's when she saw it. There was a dark, looming figure standing at the foot of her bed. Its presence filled the room, thick and suffocating. The shadow moved closer, climbing onto her, and that's when she felt that weight again. Jessica fought with everything she had. She struggled. Her body wouldn't move, but she still fought. Downstairs, her mother had just returned from running errands, and the moment she stepped in, she could hear screams. Jessica's cries rang through the house. Without hesitation, she ran upstairs and found her daughter trembling, tears streaming down her face. She was stuck on the bed and she couldn't move. It was only after her mother came in that she could move. She started crying, scared about everything that had happened to her. Her mother held on to her, telling her everything will be fine. But both of them knew it was not true. The family was beyond worried now. What started as simple, small, irritating pranks had now turned into something worse. The mayor of Pittsburgh, Tom Murphy, who was a personal friend of Cranmer, went to see the Bishop of Pittsburgh, Donald Burrell. He wanted to request assistance in this case. When the bishop heard everything that had happened with the family, he immediately went to Father Ron, a man who had years of experience fighting with the paranormal. When the bishop told him everything, he immediately agreed, and he was assigned a team. Father Ron had spoken to Bob on behalf of the church. From whatever conversation they had, overall, he found out what he had to do. The Cranmer family was in trouble, and whatever was troubling them was refusing to leave. Father Ron gave them two choices. They could stay in the house and fight with all the support from the church, or they could just leave. But if they left, there was no guarantee that these forces would not follow them. And that's when Bob decided that the best thing he could do was stay back and fight. Once Bob had made his decision that he was going to fight, the church began to make preparations to send help to the family. Each day was a battle against fear, but they remained strong. Not long after the phone call with Father Ron, the family gathered in the dining room for breakfast. Bobby Jr. came downstairs and took a seat at the table. His face looked tired. His eyes were heavy. He told his mother that he hadn't slept well, that something was troubling him at night, and he couldn't sleep. He told them that he started to feel a burning sensation on his back. Before Lisa's eyes, he lifted his shirt and showed her the scratches on his skin. When Bob looked, he was shocked because those were the exact same scratches that he had gotten some time back. He didn't want to panic, so he turned to his children and in the calmest voice told them to go and wash their wounds. He then quickly called Lisa and with a heavy heart told that he had also gotten these scratches. And that's when she also told that she had been physically marked. She lifted her shirt slowly and showed him the wound on her left shoulder. It was not a scratch, but a bite, one so deep that it had drawn blood. The wound was still fresh. Bob's heart shattered. The bite was not human. The shape, the depth, it was something else, something unnatural. A terrible silence fell between them. They were no longer dealing with someone just troubling them. This was much worse, and it was just getting started. Bobby had noticed strange puncture wounds, almost like fangs, on his body. He wasn't sure what to make of them. Later that day, he contacted Father Mike again, who had previously helped with the situation. After receiving special permission, Father Mike came back to perform a mass inside the Brownsville home. He suspected the cause of the disturbance might not be human spirits. He realized that whatever was troubling them was not human spirits, but demonic. Last time when he was in the house, he knew that there were spirits, but he was not sure if the spirits were human or not. But this time, when he saw the bite marks, he was 100% sure they were not human spirits. They were something more demonic. After the mass, Bob and his wife Lisa were sitting for dinner when they received a call from upstairs. It was Jessica. She told them that Colin, their grandson, wanted to come downstairs to see his grandparents. Jessica didn't want to disturb Bobby and Lisa's quiet time, so she sent him down the stairs from the top floor. Now remember, the house had 3 sets of stairs, and as Colin came downstairs to his grandparents, something terrifying happened. Suddenly, they heard him scream in panic. Bob rushed to him and found Colin shaking, terrified, and pointed to an open door. The child screamed about a monster and looked scared. At that moment, Bob realized that whatever force was at play wasn't going to stop, and if he didn't do something, then his grandson was going to pay the price. As much as Jessica and her family had grown to love the house, they knew that they had to leave, at least for the sake of a son. Days passed after Jessica and her family moved out. One evening, Bob returned home from work and walked through the hallway to his kitchen. As he made his way to the house, he felt that strange feeling again, as if he was being watched. He froze in his tracks and turned around slowly, expecting to see something. But there was nothing there. Instead, to his horror, he saw fresh blood coming down the walls. It was as if wherever Father Mike had sprinkled holy water, it had turned into blood. At first, Bob wasn't sure if what he was seeing was real or not, and so he called his son Bobby to come and see. When Bobby said that he saw the same thing, Bob was sure. Bob would go on to say that it looked as if the house was bleeding. Bob was now at his wits' end. He spoke with Father Linguine, who suggested that they might need to take further action. Father Linguine told Bob that he was planning to recommend to the bishop that the house undergo a formal exorcism. But at first, the family needed to go through one test. They needed to find out what exactly was happening. So they told him to go and find a non-religious group to come and investigate the house. Basically, go and find any ghost investigators, call them to the house, ask them to take a tour and see if they could feel something. Maybe this was not a demon, maybe it was something else. And the only way to find out was to call someone who was not connected to the church. And if this team or this person that they called found something, then the church would send in their help. By now, Bob was so frustrated that he was ready to do anything. He immediately contacted people, and a team which came from the Penn State was scheduled to arrive in January of 2005. As the investigators began setting up, the lead investigator, Adam Bly, toured the house with Bob. What Bob didn't realize was that Adam's role wasn't just about investigating, but he also was checking the family. His job involved making sure that no one in the family was insane or making things up. After talking with Bob, Adam concluded that the family was indeed sane and they were not making anything up. When Adam asked Bob if there was a specific moment that things went crazy, Bob immediately thought about the closet. He said that things started to get worse after the closet incident. Adam agreed that maybe this was the origin of the haunting. The closet was where everything was happening. This could also explain why they were hearing knocking sounds from underneath the stairs. He believed that the source of this disturbance was under the stairs. Bob helped Adam break into the wall from inside of the closet to check further. It wasn't an easy task. They had to break a wall, but what they found inside scared them. Among the dust and cobwebs, they found a door leading to a hidden room. At the center of this room, covered in layers of dust, there seemed to be something strange. It looked like an altar. To the right of the altar, there was an old faded piece of paper. Upon looking closer, they found that the paper had a strange drawing on it and the name of the house's original owner. But there was one thing that caught their attention, and it was the word Malik. It turns out that Malik was the last name of the original owner of the house. It was very same to Molech, a demon from the Old Testament. This discovery made Adam believe that that was the demon who was inside his house. After everything that Adam had seen, the altar, the mysterious paper, the name Malik, he needed some time to breathe, and so he walked into the main living room, trying to take in everything that he had just experienced. But as he stood there, something happened. Out of nowhere, the letters Sathi, appeared before him. At the same time, an invisible force scratched his forehead, causing Adam to scream in pain. His cries quickly drew attention of the rest of the team, who rushed to his side. They tried to calm him down, but Adam was more focused on finding out what those letters meant. He immediately ran to the investigation's base camp and began searching the internet for any clues. What he found only deepened the mystery. The word Sati was connected to a female demon who served under Malak. This demon's role was to make sure that women sacrificed their children to Malak. This shocked everyone because now they were scared for the children of the house. On the other hand, Bob was also doing some research on his own. He wanted to know more about the property. He found out that the land where the house stood had once been the site of a brutal conflict between the Native Americans and settlers in the 1790s. In all his research, there was one shocking story. A woman and her 2 children had been killed by tribesmen near Fort Pitt, close to the site of their current home. All the death and sorrow in that area seemed to have attracted a dark force, and Bob wasn't surprised that a demon decided to live there. To dig deeper into this mystery, Bob decided to hire a team of professionals to scan the property. He wanted to know if there were any bodies buried in that property. When the scan was completed, the results were shocking. They discovered the remains of 4 bodies and what appeared to be a burial site near the old oak tree in the front yard. Bob didn't want to disturb the dead, so he decided that he would honor them by placing crosses on the ground, hoping that the souls would find peace. But despite everything that he found, he couldn't answer this one question. These deaths happened outside his property, so why were these demons attacking his house and his family? Months passed after the investigation, and just when it seemed like things could never get better, Bob and Lisa received some good news. The church had finally approved an exorcism on their house. In September of 2005, an exorcist arrived to begin his work. During the exorcism, everything remained calm. There were no immediate issues, there didn't seem to be anyone disturbing them, but Bob had this feeling like there was someone watching them. For about 3 months after the exorcism, things were quiet. But one evening, while Bob was working in the basement on the hot water heater, he was suddenly overcome with this feeling like he was being watched. It was the exact same feeling that he had felt before. When he looked up, he saw the figure of a woman who quickly disappeared into another room. Bob rushed into the room where she had gone, but when he went inside, she was not there. He hurried upstairs, found Lisa, and told her everything. Together, they decided to call Father Mike, who agreed to help. The next evening, Father Mike came to the house and conducted a mass. But while he was conducting the mass, strange things began to happen. All 3 of them heard scratching sounds that were coming from inside the walls. During the consecration of the wine, 3 distinct knocks echoed from the walls near the priest, something that was impossible. The mass ended, but it was clear to everyone that the battle was not. It would take another 2 years for the priests to come and bless the house before the demon was finally driven out of the house. The process was long and exhausting, but eventually peace returned. But the story didn't end there. Bob and Lisa had many questions. The main one, who cursed the house? The infestation of the house would come to an end in February of 2006, and Bob would write a book that was released in 2014. He was a public official, and he also had the help of the mayor, the bishop, and especially Father Ronald. With all of this, it gave more weightage to his story, and that's why people believe that this story is true and the house was actually haunted, despite some others believing that it may not. Sadly, the family story didn't end here. In March of 2015, Bob and Lisa's son, David, would pass away. His death put both of them in deep depression, especially after battling with a demon for several years. In 2018, after decades of struggle, Bob and Lisa divorced, ending their 37 years of marriage. Despite everything that happened, the two decided to part ways. After the house was fully cleansed of the demon, Bob decided to turn his house into a bed and breakfast in 2019. He said that he wanted others to come and experience the house. But one thing, there was no entity, no demon in the house. Just a bed and breakfast. This created a lot of confusion with people and a lot of questions to come. One of the main was he spent several years battling with a demon, trying to protect his family. He even lost his marriage. After all that happened, he lost his son, he lost his marriage. Why would he want to live in the same house that tortured his entire family? There was no answer to that. While researching this case, I came across a few questions of my own. First, why force your kids to suffer under a demon? You know the house is haunted. You knew it from the very beginning. There were small things that were happening in the house. Why not just take your family and leave? In the Amityville story that I covered, the family left as soon as they found out that the house was haunted. So why didn't Bob just take his family and leave? I think there was some sort of abuse going on in the house that had nothing to do with demons. From all the things that the children had said, all the interviews that were given, there seems to be some sort of abuse that was going on in the house, which is not clear. Bob would go on to say that he got the supposed demon to leave the house by playing the Passion of the Christ on loop for 6 months straight. So for 6 months straight, he played the movie The Passion of the Christ on loop so that the demon would just leave the house. The demon just left the house, and then Bob turned the house into a bed and breakfast. Now, one of the biggest criticisms came from several children or grandchildren of the two families who lived in that house before Bob. They said they never felt any paranormal activity, there was no demon, there was no haunting, nothing. They just lived in the house, they had a happy life, they wanted to sell the house, they sold the house, and they left. In fact, the family that stayed before Bob was upset because Bob was dragging their reputation also through the mud by writing this book and then telling people that the house was haunted. Even though he had changed their names in the book, they were not happy with the fact that Bob had used their life as an example. Now, when this came up and one of the previous owners was not happy about Bob talking about the house or the previous owners, Bob would go on to say that people are always concerned that they will be held legally liable if they do not tell everything to the buyers, especially if the house is haunted. So he is basically saying that people are afraid that if they tell the buyer that the house is haunted, the buyer is not going to buy the house, which is of course true. So Bob is saying that he's not revealing anything and that these people are just angry that he spoke what they didn't want to. As said before, the story is a little complicated because Bob's family is the only family who openly said that the house was haunted. No other family who lived in that house said that the house was haunted. He also said that the son of a man who grew up in the neighborhood during the 1930s said that the house was a very haunted place. He also said that one of the sons of the previous owners verified the strange activity. At one point, Bob even offered to pay to take a lie detector test to prove that the house was haunted and his family suffered for years. It was said that there was a doctor who was conducting illegal activity on that property years ago, and that maybe that is why there was a demon in that house. Bob would go on to say that after the publication of his book in July of 2016, a granddaughter of that same doctor contacted him and told him that even though she was too young when all these illegal practices were going on, she confirmed that there were some memories of a demonic activity happening in that house. Bob would claim that he spoke to a woman named Barbara Paisley, whose parents, Walter and Margaret Wagner, owned the home from 1941 to 1979. In the book, he claimed that he spoke to Mrs. Paisley and asked her if she or her family members had experienced something, and she said, "Oh, yes, many times." But unfortunately, Barbara Paisley would pass away just before the book's launch. So, again, unfortunately, there is no way to talk to her or to prove if this is right or wrong. However, according to Barbara Paisley's daughter, Karen, she would go on to say that there was nothing that she experienced in that house. She said, "My mother never said anything about the house being haunted. My grandmother never said anything about the house being haunted. And my grandfather never said anything about the house being haunted. If he wants to go and write it from 1988 and go forward, do it. I don't care. But if you want to lie about other people and things that happened before that, well, no, that's not right." So Karen Dwyer is basically saying the time where my mother and my grandmother lived in this house, it was not haunted. If you want to prove that the house was haunted after they left the house, go forward and do it. If you want to say that the house was haunted while you were in the house, say it, but don't lie about other people. That's why I said there are a lot of people who don't believe that the house was actually haunted, and because Bob was at this position where he was into politics, and of course later on he would turn this house into bed and breakfast, many believe that there was something else going on in the house. Maybe there was some sort of abuse going on in the house, which Bob would end up disguising as demonic possession or demonic activity. It's unfortunate, but there is no way to prove that. There is no way to prove the abuse. There is no way to prove the demonic activity. I'll link all my sources in the description, but basically, if you read most of the articles, you will see that there is a lot of to and fro that happens between Bob and the previous owners, because everyone claims that they have never experienced anything, while Bob is here passing out proofs and telling this happened, that happened. It's a lot of to and fro. Talking about the blood that appeared on the walls, he described the scene as, quote, "All the walls, including 2 doors, were spattered with large drops of red blood from the ceiling to the floor. The blood was still wet and was running down the walls. It was as if someone had taken a container and a sponge and sprinkled the walls, as Father Mike had done numerous times, with holy water. Over the next several weeks, the blood continued to be sprinkled down both staircases to the first floor, including my den. Some of the areas where the blood was dripping from were so far up, 9 feet, that a person would have to use a ladder to get there. Another interesting aspect was that it was only on the walls and not on the ceiling. So it was thrown up there, it would be impossible to miss hitting the ceilings. It looked as if the walls were bleeding." End quote. And despite all this description that Bob gave, unfortunately, there is no proper photograph of this blood. The only photograph that Bob could show had 2 or 3 spots on the wall, and that too you could not make out. It just looked like someone sprinkled a little bit with their fingers. It does not look like a proper bleeding wall the way that he described. I just read out to you word for word to what Bob had said, and the photograph that were given did not justify that. During the start of my podcasting journey, I had covered this case, The Bleeding House. You can always listen to it. It is equally scary and interesting. And if you look at the photos of the Bleeding House, which were published in the newspaper, you will see that the walls were completely covered with blood. It looked like the walls were actually bleeding. There was blood everywhere. But if you see the photo that Bob provided, it just had a few drops. Bob would go on to say that this was a poor quality photo, it was an old photo, and that's why it looked like that. Thiago Gasparino, a forensic expert, would go on to say, quote, "From a blood spatter perspective, the image is quite poor quality for analysis." End quote. According to Bob, after the demon was removed from the property, he was more than excited to turn it into a bed and breakfast. According to an article in the Pittsburgh Magazine, these are some of the things that Bob had said. I'm going to read them out for you word for word, and you let me know if they sound like someone who had been tormented in the house for years and was now excited to turn it into a bed and breakfast. In the interview, Bob would go on to say that he has two conditions for future guests: no ghost hunters or Ouija boards allowed. Quote, "The message that I'm putting forward is the house is fine now. It's safe. It's not a crazy place to be. It's nice, welcoming. My grandkids sleep here. I live on the third floor. It's a separate apartment. My son is going to run the establishment during the day, and I'll be here in the evening." End quote. When Bob was asked why didn't he just sell the house rather than turn it into a bed and breakfast, he said that when the book was released, the publicity surrounding the house was so much that no one wanted to buy the house, or that he would have to downsize if he had to sell the house. So it was more profitable for him to run a bed and breakfast than sell the house for a lower rate. When reading the interview, it seemed as if Bob was very excited to turn this house into a B&B. He said that each room will have its own theme. His favorite is the blue room, which pays homage to his book. The room also has a surprising painting that he found in an antique shop. He said, quote, "I spent a lot of time in that room during the battle, so to speak, with the evil entity. I also have a picture in that room that I'm very partial to, of a woman that I feel looks like my woman in my book who died there in that house." End quote. As we end this episode, I would like to know from you, what do you think? Was the house really haunted? Was there some sort of an abuse, do you think, that was going on behind the walls? If you lived through a haunted house experience for several years, do you think that you would turn that into a B&B? I think that's my biggest question. Please do write this in the comments because I am interested and I am excited. I would like to know from you, do you think the house was really haunted? Or was Bob and his family playing off with something big? What do you think? A big thank you to all my fellow listeners who have been listening and supporting this episode. Your reviews, your listens mean a lot. If you love this episode, if you love the stories that I put out, then please do leave a rating on whichever podcasting platform you're listening from. It would really mean the world to me. Other than this, I also have a YouTube and an Instagram page. I'll link it in the description. Do check it out. I have different stories on Instagram, and I'm planning to put out some short horror stories on YouTube. So do subscribe to my YouTube channel and stay tuned. I am also an author, love fiction stories. If you want to check out my free fiction book, I'll link it in the description. I'll also link my other account in the description where I talk about fiction writing, travel, and I also will soon start sharing fiction stories. So stay tuned. So do follow me there. Thank you so much for everything. That's all for this week. Stay kind, stay safe, and see you next week.